Van's asking, number one, I go long or short based on an EMA 15 cross of an SMA 50. Alright, so let's just kind of set this up and get some visual references here to work with. And yeah, Van had mentioned the crude oil, and I just happen to have a chart of the crude oil here. Alright, so we have an EMA 15. Let's see, what is this? This is an SMA, and he's also using an SMA 50. So let me change this to a 50, and we'll change the EMA on the chart here to a 15. Alright, so there's our two moving averages, and let's get rid of these two indicators here. Alright, so we're looking at some crossover conditions. Alright, so we're going to go long or short based off of the crossover. And now here's the advanced part that Van's, I guess, really interested in working on. So he wants to stop long or short after the EMA, after the moving averages cross over each other 4 times. The crossovers that have a price within plus or minus 40 cents don't count. So I believe what Van is saying, that so he has this crossover here, and we have we have a price for this crossover, like so. And so our price is, we'll just round it off and say our price is at $102.90. We'll just round it off, make it easy. And so Van is saying that the crossovers, around this level, plus or minus 40 cents. So let's make a couple of offsets here. So we'll add 40 cents to our crossover price. So that's going to be 103.30. 30. And let's just set this to a dashed line, and how about if we make it gray, something like that, and alright, I need to scale my chart down. There we go. And let's see, that's a little dark. Let me lighten this up here. Alright, so there's our plus 40 cents. And now we have to make one that's minus 40 cents down here somewhere. Like so. So what Dan is getting at is that any crossovers, right, that happen in this range here don't count as waiting for a crossover 4 times. So Van's wanting to wait for a crossover, 4 other crossovers to occur outside of this 40-cent range here. And just reading the rest of his question just to make sure I didn't miss anything. Alright, so yeah, so that's essentially it. So Van, we're missing a key component here. So we need an indicator that's going to track this price, right? So keep in mind, BloodHound uses your indicators, right, that create the price, that kind of draw on your chart, so that BloodHound uses indicators, prices, to build its conditions. Right? So BloodHound isn't like a Swiss Army knife of indicators that'll do anything you want. So, BloodHound was not built to, I guess, create the mathematical formula or the indicator that's needed to generate this reference price here, right? So you need an indicator that actually performs the mathematical function that takes that figures out your crossover price. So even NinjaTrader's crossover function doesn't calculate where the price actually crosses over. I actually haven't seen an indicator yet that actually calculates what that price is. NinjaTrader has a function, it has a crossover function that tells you when two plots have crossed over each other, but it doesn't calculate that actual price. And I haven't seen anybody actually design an indicator that calculates that price. So that's kind of the first key thing that has to be solved, is to actually create a custom indicator that can calculate that exact crossover price, right? You have to use what's not trig, some math there to figure out that price, and then from there that the indicator could then calculate your offset price, right? Your plus or minus 40-cent offset price. So that way BloodHound will know what these prices are. And then also that same indicator would have to tell BloodHound, what this actual crossover price is as well. And then BloodHound could compare the other crossover prices. So you need another indicator. Well, in theory you could use the same indicator that you'd have to build, right? And that same indicator could tell us what this next crossover price is, and then BloodHound can do all the comparisons and compare, is this crossover within this range that you've defined here. So that's kind of the core key thing that's missing here. But to get into your question about using the counter node, I can touch on that a little bit, but we really can't address this without this custom indicator that calculates the crossover price. So, and like I said, unfortunately I have not seen any kind of indicator that calculates that crossover price. But to kind of give you an idea of using the counter node, let's go over that real quick. So I was going to create a new logic board here, and I'm going to create a crossover solver like so. Let's connect it in, and the EMA 15 is our faster moving average, so let's put that in first. Alright, so the EMA 15, our faster moving average, is put that in indicator A, and we'll put our slower moving average in the indicator B section here. So I just need to change this to a 50 period, like so. Alright, we now have some crossovers here on the chart, and see if I can find a place where there's just a lot of whipsaw action going on. Well, I guess this will do. Let me just shrink up my chart here. There we go. And so from the function nodes list, I can grab the signal counter, and I'm going to plug the solver into the input label here. So I'll zoom in there so you can see these labels. Alright. Now, inside the signal counter, we have the main two parameters here are the count up to, right? So we need to tell the solver, how many signals are we counting up to, right? So essentially what we're saying is, how many of these crossover signals do we want to count? Are we looking for? And so let's put 4 in here. And now the next thing you have to do is you have to specify some kind of lookback period. Right, you have to tell a computer, how far back to look in time do we start counting from. And so let's just put how about 100 bars in here, and we'll see how that looks. And let's see, I will need to mark these here, so let me mark these signals. Alright, so now we have those marked for reference. So now, if we take a look at the signal counter, we can see what it's doing. So we can see the output from the signal counter. So we get this first crossover, and the signal counters, initially, it's just going to start kind of counting up for us. So let's scroll over here. So we'll scroll the chart way over. So we can see the output from, right, so we're looking at the output from the signal counter. And since we're counting up to 4 occurrences, 4 crossovers in this case, right, the output on the very first crossover that it sees in looking back 100 bars, so I can see from this gap here, see where there's a few bars here where there's no output. So what that's telling me is that from this point back 100 bars, there were no crossover conditions, and therefore, right, the signal counter node didn't have any output. And so essentially we get to our first crossover here, and so that's the first crossover. That's 1 of 4. So its output here is at 1/4, right? So we have 1/4 of our signals that we're looking for, right? And now when we scroll forward, and also keep in mind that the function nodes are counting the long signals versus the short signals, short crossover, short signals. Yeah, the long signals versus the short signals separately, right? So we got our first cross down, right? So we got a short output from the solver, right? So the solver gave the signal counter a short output, and so we can see we have 1/4 down there. So now if we keep scrolling forward, so now we get to our next long signal, and we see the output now stepped up to 0.5 or a half, right? So we got 2 signals out of 4, so that's a half. So we know that we've counted 2 long signals now. So the signal counter has counted 2 long signals out of this solver. Now it keeps going forward, and You see right here the counter node basically, dropped down 1/4 of a point. And what that's saying is that from this point back, as the signal counter looks back in time, as it looks back 100 bars, it's only seeing one signal. So this first signal here is more than 100 bars away, and so the output dropped down. So essentially what that's telling me is I probably need to increase this lookback period. So let's increase that to 200. Okay. Now that changes things a lot. So remember, there used to be a gap in here. Remember, there used to be a gap in here. And now there isn't, because the signal counter is now from this point is looking back 200 bars. So it actually did find one crossover looking back 200 bars. So if we start over again here. So prior to the crossover, we already have one crossover. And yeah, as we look back here, we can see there's a whole bunch of crossovers here on our chart. So essentially, this was like the second signal coming in to the signal counter. So it steps up to 0.5. If we keep going forward, we get to this signal here coming in, and once again, as the signal counter looks back 200 bars, it still only sees 2. Alright, so this one that occurred over here basically dropped out because it's more than 200 bars away. And now, as we keep going forward in our chart, we get to another long signal, or another crossover, and now we can see the signal counter, right? Its output is up to 3/4 now. So now we've found 3 out of the 4 signals that we're counting. If we keep going forward, and there we go. There's our 4th crossover long signal that we got in looking back 200 bars. And then the output, right? The output for the signal counter is now 1. So it's telling us that we have 4 out of 4 signals when we look back in time for 200 bars. So that, in essence, is kind of how the signal counter works. Now there's other ways that we can kind of control when the signal counter starts counting. Based on inputs that come in here. So we can use these various types of reset functionality to start the counting over, right? So in other words, we're resetting the counting from back to 0. Let's see if I can kind of come up with an example here. See, maybe I can use a larger moving average to do that. All right. Yeah, so kind of a very simple example of resetting the signal counter I'll use this moving average, and I'll just say, you know, when this moving average kind of changes direction, when it changes from sloping down to sloping up. So what I'm going to be looking at is the inflection of that 200 EMA. So let me build this condition here. And yeah, we're getting, all right, so as we're in this little area of chop right here, right, we can see this 200 EMA is you know, reversing up and down a whole lot until we finally get a solid trend going. So it's going to do a lot of resetting in this area, but let me just kind of mark this. So remember, this square here is kind of marking all the resetting that's going on here by our moving average. There. All right. I should start naming these solvers. There we go, EMA 200. And this crossover, right, these are EMA 15 over the SMA, SMA 50. Alright, so I'm going to plug this inflection solver into, right, I plugged it into the reset node here of the signal counter. So let's take a look at our, let's see, oh, got the wrong node selected, there we go. So selecting the signal counter, if we take a look at all of our reset functions here, so we have this reset signal set to true and everything else set to false, right? So this reset signal, the first word here, see how the first word is either input or reset. So that's referring to the node, right? And that's referring to the input node or this reset connector, right? So when we get a signal coming in to this reset connector, right, that's going to reset the counting. It's going to reset our counting back to 0. And so if we take a look here, right, so we have our second, right, our second signal counted, and we go back here, we get this other one, and so once again we have 2 signals counted, and then we get our third signal counted right here, so we can see the output from the signal counter stepping up. So we have 2/3, and we can see that we can see the rectangle here representing, right, our EMA changing direction. And so as we keep stepping forward, right, we can see that now there's no output from the signal counter. So this condition here of the EMA changing direction reset our signal counter back to 0. And so now there's no output. And then we finally start getting some signals coming back, right? Some crossover signals coming back into the signal counter, and we can see that we're getting an output now. So the signal counter has picked up, right, one signal in each direction, right? So we picked up one short signal and one long signal here. So let's see. How about to kind of elaborate upon this, I think Van isn't really counting, long crosses up versus short crosses up. I think he's just counting the number of crossovers. So if we wanted to do that, now what we could do is we could modify the signal coming out of our crossover solver. Alright, so let's take a look at our crossover solver here. Right, so originally, right, the crossover solver is just giving us a long when we cross up and a short when we cross down. But let's just say we just wanted to just count, any crossover as just a crossover. But we can see that the signal counter, counts the long crosses versus the short crosses separately, right? Because it has a different long output versus short output. So what we can do is we can use this long-short modifier to kind of modify the signals here. And let's see, mode. So to do this, right now, right, this long-short modifier, its default setting is it just kind of swaps or reverses the signals that's coming into it. So you can see here where we have cross up, we now have a short signal, right? And this cross down used to be a short signal, but now it's a long signal. So you can see how those signals have been reversed. But what we actually would like to do is we want to get a long and a short at the same time on the same bar. And so let's see, what we can do is, in this case I think we can use the addition. We can use the addition. So it's going to add the long output to the short output and then reflect that in both the long and the short output. So we can see the addition is now giving us a long and a short signal on every crossover. So if we plug that into our signal counter, now we can see the signal counter is just, right, it's just counting just the raw crossovers. So that's actually, let me mark some more crossovers on my chart. Let's see, yeah, so we have a long crossover there, and we have a short crossover there. Alright, so we can see the signal counters just, right, it's now counting our first crossover, then it gets to our second crossover, then we get a third crossover, and then we get a fourth crossover looking back 200 bars. And right, so that's kind of how we can use our signal counter just to count, the raw crossovers, regardless of the direction. So, and then of course we get kind of get in this area. And so as we look back 200 bars, it looks like this crossover way out here drops off our 200 bar look back, because we can see the output of the crossover solver kind of drops down there. And then remember, we still have that reset condition here. So when this 200 EMA starts changing direction, right, it's resetting our signal counter. And then we get to start counting signals all over again. So, all right, well, I guess that's kind of a very simple overview of the signal counter. Let's see, I think Van's got a question about this, so give me just a moment here. Yeah, so Van is asking, can you use the signal counter to count how many crossovers for the downtrend, same for an uptrend? Yep. So Sam, that's essentially what I've done here. Essentially what I've done here is I've used this to kind of reset the signal counter based on the uptrend or downtrend of our 200 EMA here. So I've used the 200 EMA to kind of determine right when we're in a downtrend versus when we're in an uptrend. And oops, Dan was asking how did I zoom? Alright, there we go, chart's back. So the way I zoomed is you put your mouse down here on the time bar and you left click and then you drag. So you just drag along the time bar there. And you just drag your mouse, left or right. Alright, so back to Van's question about counting crossovers, on a downtrend versus an uptrend. So we can see here on the 200 EMA here, Van, once again we have a bunch of inflection signals here. We can see that the 200 EMA is essentially kind of changing directions here. So that's how I did that. And see, Van is also asking, can you use backtest feature to extract these crossover data? I suppose you could, but that would require writing some custom code. You'd have to write your own custom strategy code to extract that data. NinjaTrader doesn't have any native way to extract crossover data. I'm not exactly sure what type of crossover data you mean, but yeah, if you're kind of wanting to extract some custom like price data of when these crossovers occur and stuff like that, you have to write your own custom strategy to do that. Alright, so Ken's got a question here. Does BloodHound only use standard NT indicators, or can it use any third-party indicator in a strategy? Yeah, Ken, yeah. BloodHound can use any indicator as long as the indicator reveals its data to another indicator. So for example, I do have a few indicators that came from Big Mike's or from NinjaTrader's download section. Right, so you can see all of these ANA indicators on here. I think these ANA ones came from Big Mike's. Let's take a look at like this ANA Super Trend. Put this on the chart, and I'm going to make this 200 EMA a little smaller there. So let me expand my chart out a little bit. Right, so we can see these blue lines and red line, so that's coming from the ANA super trend. Alright, looks like its own custom version of the super trend. And see if I can make this a little thicker here. Alright, so we'll do a little simple test with this indicator. And I guess before I go any further, let me give my BloodHound file a name. Alright, the 30th today. And I'll just make a new logic template. And let's see. Let's call it a third-party indicator test. And let's see. How about if we just do a simple test, testing when this indicator changes directions from, basically I guess a short trend direction to a long trend direction when it's blue. So I'm just going to grab the comparison solver. And I'm just simply going to compare the closing price to the ANA super trend plots. So let me go find this up here. There we go. And let's see, stop dot, stop line. I don't know which one of these to use, so I'll just kind of try them both and see what happens. So I'll just try using the stop dot first. See what we get. And interesting. All right, it's working out here. Technically, this is correct. Right, I can see. If I scale this way up, even though we still have a red plot here, the closing price of this bar is technically higher than the red line. And so that's why we have a long signal here. So technically this is correct. So everything's not quite interesting. So this indicator allows price to break the plot by at least one bar before the plots kind of reverse. So yeah, so we're able to use any kind of custom indicator, as long as its data is readable by another indicator. Some of these third-party indicators that you buy from people, they purposefully disable the ability, to read the data. So even though you can see, the lines being plotted on the chart, and even though you can see the value of the, of the line in the data box here, there's still a way that you can still disable an indicator's plot data from being used inside of another indicator. So some of these third-party people do disable that stuff on purpose. So if you're finding that an indicator is not working with BloodHound, you'll just have to go back to the author, the owner of the indicator, and ask them, if they disabled their indicator from being used inside of a strategy, or being used or being read by another indicator. So let's see. All right. So Doug is saying he has Raven on a chart, and a trade was marked, but no auto trade. Well, let's see. So Doug, are you using an ATM, or are you using, Raven's Raven's profit target and stop loss to specify a trade? And also, Doug, are you using a market order or are you using a limit order? So there's a lot of things that could have happened there, Doug. All right, so we submitted a market, and so were you specifying an ATM, or were you just using a Raven submitting a Raven order? All right, so Doug was using an ATM and Raven. All right, so Doug, that's probably what I would suspect is probably what the issue is. When you make sure, I'll give you some tips here. So let me pull up a DOM. Pull up the Superdome here. Some suggestions for your name. I try not to use spaces, and try not to use any special characters in the name. That can help. So most likely what's happened is you just have the wrong name in Raven. Most likely the case. So when I kind of demonstrate using an ATM in Raven, I typically try and keep my ATM names pretty simple. So like in this case, I put BH for BloodHound, T is for target, so I know this ATM has a 10-tick target, and S is for stop, so I know the stop is a 6-tick stop, and Q is for quantity, so I know it's going to submit 7 contracts there. And let's set up a little test here. Let's see, alright, I've got live data coming in, and let me I'll create a very simple logic here. So I'm just going to check for when the closing price reverses and submit a signal that way. Alright, so we can see we got all these closing price reversing here. Alright, so let me close that out to save it, and we'll add Raven onto the chart here. Alright, so I'm gonna, first thing is load up my BloodHound template, and click on File. Right, and it's going to be the very first one up on the top. So this list of BloodHound files here are sorted by date. Right, so they're organized by when the file was last saved. So, alright, so my BloodHound file is going to be right up on the top, like that. Now, as good practice, I always like to go into the Logic tab and take a look at the logic template that I'm going to be trading from. Right, and I just like to make sure that everything looks correct. Typically your systems are going to be far more advanced, and so if you get an advanced one, I just like to make sure all the leaders are connected correctly. Like here's a good example. If I go to the signal counter, and I look at this, let me expand this out. Look, I can look at that and go, oh, remember I was kind of doing some explanation and I left this in a broken state, so really it should have been connected up like that. So this is just kind of a good double check, make sure you left all your leaders in a correct state. So that's why I like to take a look at the logic template that I'm going to be, that I want to trade. So let me put this back to the inflection signal there. Click OK. I'll put my entry logic on the inflection entry. And alright, so we're going to just submit a market order. So we're not going to use this. We'll leave this on false. And the next step to use an ATM is I change my default to ATM. Now I just need to get the name. So it's kind of good to have your DOM over here so you can read the name off. But I know it's BloodHound. Oops, BloodHound, and my target is a 10 tick target. My stop is a 6 tick stop, and my quantity is 7. So there's the name of my ATM. Last step is to turn this on, set it to true, and click the OK button. Alright, now we'll just kind of have to sit and wait for oil to do something here. I wonder, how about if I switch this over to the YM? I think we ought to get a lot more movement, hopefully. So the YM's a lot more volatile. And hopefully we'll get a trade firing off here. So while we're waiting on this, let me take a look through the questions here and see what else we got here. Doug is saying you can't change the default. Well, Doug, so if you open up a strategy, and let me open up my strategy window, there we go. Right, if I go down here, now you notice this is an active strategy. It's running, it's turned on. Right, I can see the enable is turned on. So you notice how everything's grayed out, right? You can't modify a strategy when it's actually running. So if you want to modify it, you have to turn this off, hit the apply button, so you turn the strategy off, and then you can go in there and change your change the default here to ATM. And alright, so we're waiting on this to fire off a trade. Yeah, so Doug, it sounds like you're a little new to using NinjaTrader strategies. So let me pull up a suggestion here. Whoops. Don't want to cover up our trade. So just like how we post our video recordings up here, NinjaTrader also posts all their videos up here on YouTube. So if you want to, so all of Ninja's trading videos are up here on YouTube as well. So we can go to youtube.com/Ninja Trader, and I think it's NinjaTrader LLC. Let's see if that works. Yes, okay. So if you just type in youtube.com, and you can actually take the user part out. So if you just type in youtube.com NinjaTrader LLC, it'll take you to their YouTube page, and you can scroll through. You can see they have some categories here, and oh, look at that. So yeah, we just recently did a partner presentation with them, and let me turn this ad off. There we go. So we can see up in their recent upload section, we actually just did a NinjaTrader webinar just recently. Nothing new there. I'm sure you guys have all seen that before. But if we scroll down here, we can see they have NinjaTrader training. So let me click in here, and you can see they have all of these different training videos. And the one that would be good for you, oh, here we go. It's the very first one on the top. Automated Strategy Development Level 1. So that's a good one to watch. They're going to go over kind of the basics of using a strategy. You know, the do's and the don'ts. You know, of of running a strategy and stuff like that. So it's kind of basic information that you should all have, that you should all know when you're running a strategy such as Raven. Let's see if there's any more down here for strategies. I think they only have one training video on strategies. Right? Yeah. They don't get very deep into strategies because basically all strategies are custom coded. NinjaTrader doesn't come with any pre-written strategies. The strategy section, basically you have to write your own strategy code. So they don't get into it very far. But what they do cover, I think they probably cover some of these samples here, and they just kind of tell you some of the limitations and requirements to getting a strategy up and running. And wow, it looks like we just have a dead market today. Even the YM's not moving. So I'm sure this is going to fire off eventually. I'm really surprised a 5-range bar has not created a couple signals on the YM. Alright. Doug is asking, do I need to have the DOM open when using an ATM in Raven? No, you don't. I just have it open just so I had a reference of the name. Just so I can make sure that I got the name spelled correctly. But no, you absolutely do not need to have your DOM open. You could, if you like using the DOM to manage your ATM, that might be one reason to have a DOM open. That's right, I keep forgetting my DOM doesn't work in this VMware, and I haven't checked up on that yet. It might, I think it might be because of the license key that I'm using in this my NinjaTrader here. It might be restricted to not using the DOM. Yeah, because my DOM never gets populated with data. I need to check up on that. But so you could manage your ATM from the DOM, or of course you guys probably all know that you can manage your ATM from the chart trader here. So, little side note here, the next update of Raven finally got Jeremy to change this ugly orange color. So now it's a little nicer kind of greenish blue kind of color there. So the next version is going to have a nicer color. Gee, I was really hoping this trade would fire off. Man, let's see if I can let's go back to oil, see if oil's moving around a little bit. And yeah, looks like I did miss a couple of moves in oil there. Let's see, what else can I pick on? How about the NQ? See if the NQ is doing anything. Just missed a trade on the NQ. Let's see. How about if I change this to a 4 range? I guess another note here, right? You'll see that there looks like there's 2 BloodHounds on here. So one of them is, the top one is going to be, I believe, BloodHound as the indicator. Right, we can see that we have 2 buttons up on our chart now. Right, so the black button with the black text is BloodHound as an indicator. The orange one is Raven. So Raven has to call up BloodHound to get its signals, right? So the orange text is Raven, right? So they both open up the BloodHound interface, so you can go in here and make changes. I recommend that, if you're building your system, that you don't work inside of Raven. I mean, you can. There's no problems with that, but just be aware that you won't see your signals necessarily update in real time on the chart if you're working through Raven, right? So it's always best to work through BloodHound added to your chart as an indicator. That's how you get that real-time mode feedback when you're manipulating the solvers and stuff. So, and it is okay to have BloodHound and Raven on the chart at the same time. Just be aware that it just uses up that much more processing time on your CPU, right? And NinjaTrader is still single-threaded, so even though you may have a processor with 4 cores on it or 8 cores, NinjaTrader is only able to use one of the CPU cores. So it's always best to kind of get rid of anything extra on your charts. Don't overload your charts. So if you like running 6 or 8 charts, it's best not to just kind of overload them with indicators, since NinjaTrader is still single-threaded. So NinjaTrader can only use one of the CPUs. So if you're running Raven, I'd suggest taking BloodHound off. And looks like price is just not going to work with this today. Here we go. Come on. How about if we can just get, well, just to close down on this bar here, we can get a signal firing off there. Come on, one more tick. I think we just need one more tick. No, we need 2 more ticks. No, that's not going to work for us. Let's switch back over to the YM. Wow, what a dead market. Well, Doug, I was really kind of hoping to show you that ATM firing off there. But I guess I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't see any other questions coming in here. So we'll just wrap this up, and this will be a short one here. Alright, guys. Well, thanks for joining me today. And just a reminder, if you have any questions, these workshops are for you guys. You can always email your questions in ahead of time. That helps. Like Frank had emailed his question in about how Daniel Rowe uses the market analyzer. So if you have some questions, please feel free to email them in ahead of time. I ask that you send them in by Thursday. That way I have a chance to look at them and kind of...
Order filled.
Hey, finally we got a trade fired off. There we go. So I ask that you send your questions in by Thursday night. That gives me an opportunity to kind of go over the questions, and a lot of times I also need to set my charts up, so I like to set my charts up ahead of time. That way I save more time, use less time setting up the charts during the workshops, and it gives me more time to answer your guys' questions. So, all right, well, with that, guys, have a good Friday and a good weekend, and we'll see you next week.